I'm joined today by Mr. Jimmy Yim, Senior Counsel and Managing Director of Drew & Napier's Commercial Litigation and Arbitration Department.
Well, let me start by saying that in commercial disputes, there are invariably going to be questions of fact, questions as to what really had happened. And in the nature of companies and corporations, much of what takes place as a matter of commercial transaction or dispute would invariably find themselves recorded in the form of letters, exchange, or internal notes, or minutes of meetings. And in the traditional sense, these documents, if they are relevant to the issues in the case, should be offered up for discovery. Whether these documents will produce evidence that assists you, or they produce evidence that damages the other side's case, or even your own case, you have an obligation to produce them because they are relevant. Now, in the regime where we have only paper, then the discovery of documents mean no more than producing the paper to be inspected and copies to be given to the other side. But in today's world, where some 90% of all our correspondence, our documentation is in electronic format, whether in the format as emails, archived mail, or whatever else, you're going to find that it produces a whole new series of problems that is not normally encountered in paper document discovery. And one of the things about e-discovery is that sometimes it's little known that you cannot seriously destroy an email. You cannot really trash it. Even if you attempt to trash it, it is there in your trash can. And even if you try to remove it, there are ways in which we can go into the hard disk to recover what has been trashed or sought to be destroyed. So the e-discovery takes on a whole new meaning for the way in which we discover the evidence in a case. Now, the difficulty, of course, is that whether our BlackBerry or our computers, we're likely to have thousands and thousands of different letters, emails of different subjects. How in the world are you going to offer up only what is relevant? That's going to be a question of sizing down what is relevant, and that is going to require the help of experts. But that process has to be done in the event an order for e-discovery is given.
Mr. Yim, we've talked privately on the great difference between litigation and arbitration and the different courses that these two methods of dispute resolution are taking. Could you outline for me what the growth of each really holds for dispute resolution lawyers in Asia?
Yes. Well, to start with, litigation and arbitration have different origins. The litigation process is a process by which people obtain justice through the courts which have been appointed. Arbitration, on the other hand, had started out life in the form of disputes within trade associations. But subsequently, when we find globalization and investments cross-border taking place, you find that more and more companies investing in countries not wanting to have their disputes be decided by the national courts of those countries, opting out for an arbitration of their dispute. And there you pick your own judges, you pick your own law, system of law to govern it, and you pick the venue to decide the dispute between the parties. And when you have this consensual process of arbitration compared against national litigation process, there are going to be differences in focus. One area of difference in focus is that in respect of litigation, generally the perception is that the judge will want to uncover the truth behind what has happened. And therefore trials can therefore last days to weeks to months. But in arbitration, which is a consensual process, the arbitrators will require the parties to stick to what has been agreed. Whether it is to stick to what has been agreed on the discovery process, whether to stick to what has been agreed on the amount of time allotted to each party to present their case. They have to stick to what has been agreed. And sometimes something is sacrificed along the way if you have to stick to what is agreed, as opposed to allowing the case to go on in an attempt to ferret out what the judge believes is the truth.
what about the procedural convergence between litigation and arbitration? It's been a long-running concern in the legal community that arbitration is becoming more formalised along the lines of commercial litigation. It's becoming just as costly and taking just as long to resolve disputes. What implications do you think that this holds for the popularity of arbitration in the short to long term?
Well, I think it may be true in some cases, but ultimately one has to go back to the arbitration process, which is consensual between the members of the panel of the tribunal and the two sets or three sets of opposing counsel. And it's a question of what they have agreed upon. If they choose to have longer hearing days, greater amount of discovery, then you will have a longer session. On the other hand, they may opt for simply a decision by documentation or a decision where there is limited time in presentation of the case, then that will be the route that they've agreed upon. So the fundamental premise depends on what the parties have agreed with the tribunal.
Now on to Singapore's arbitration capabilities, where the last 18 months have been crucial in this regard. It is now a well-entrenched international arbitration hub, fastly becoming the seat of international arbitration in Southeast Asia. In your opinion, where to next?
Well, to start with, you will know that Singapore will soon have its own dedicated building for international commercial arbitration. There will house a number of arbitral institution offices, chambers for arbitrations, and the idea is that this will be an integrated place for arbitrations to be conducted. And the one plus of arbitration over litigation and judgments is that there is a greater universality of enforcement of the arbitral awards through the 1958 New York Convention, so that when an arbitration award is delivered in Singapore, it is enforceable in as many as 160 other countries. Just about every major nation and civilized nation is a member of the 1958 New York Convention.